All right, concept two of social Darwinism. So discuss Herbert Spencer and the philosophy of social Darwinism. And I think in the same clip we will look at concept three, which is basically comparing William Graham Sumner to Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer, this chap right here, this dashing man here, was an English philosopher who established social Darwinism as a social, economic, and moral philosophy as early as 1873. Now, it's important to understand that there's a distinction between social Darwinism and the origins of the species, sometimes known as Darwinism. So this is what Spencer kind of piggybacked his ideas on. So before I get too much into Spencer's ideas, I want to talk about a little bit of Darwin's theories. Darwin argued the species of life all around us were not created by an omnipotent, omnipresent God, but had gradually evolved over millions of years out of lower orders of life through geological changes on the planet. This was accomplished through the operation of the principle of natural selection. So, according to Darwin, all forms of life were engaged in an unceasing struggle for existence in a changing environment. Although some members of species died, those with physical variations that enabled them to adapt to changing conditions survived and passed those characteristics on to their offspring. This process is, again, it's called natural selection. So in order to understand Darwin's theory of natural selection, four ideas need to be recognized and kept in mind. One, you have hereditary. Like tends to produce like, right? So two poodles are going to, if they mate, their offspring is going to be a poodle. Two snakes, if they get together, two boa constrictors, if they get together, they mate, they're going to produce a boa constrictor. Two boa constrictors are not going to produce a poodle. Two poodles aren't going to produce a boa constrictor, right? Very basic stuff. However, you have variations. While an animal tends to produce offspring like itself, no two animals are exactly alike. There are no carbon copies. Even twins have some minor variations. So all individuals within species have variations. There is always slight individual variations in structure or function. These variations, according to Darwin, may occur because of organic causes or through just mere chance. Struggle for existence. Because there's not enough food or space for all living creatures, there is fierce competition for life, constituting a struggle for existence. And then you have adaptation to an ever-changing environment. Offspring, with the most favorable variations, that is, the best adapted to the conditions under which they live in, were the ones that survived to maturity in order became old enough basically to have offspring. The rest of the species fell in the struggle of existence and did not propagate their kind. The only organisms which remained to have offspring were those with the special abilities to adapt themselves within their ever-changing environment. Right? So in geological time, the Earth is ever-changing. Right? Places that used to be desert are now rainforests. Places that are rainforests used to be desert. Some great mountainous areas used to be the bottom of the sea. The continents all used to be together. Right? So with geological changes, this creates different circumstances for individuals within a species to survive, right? So, like Darwin took a lot of look at finches, and he was able to see how finches with large beaks were able to survive, and finches with smaller beaks on one island. But if conditions changed on that island, he was looking at the Galapagos Islands, he would notice over time that these finches would begin to, the finches with large beaks would begin to die off, and the finches with smaller beaks would begin to pass on their genes to their offspring. So just changes in the weather, if it would happen, it would tend to produce maybe plants with smaller seeds, which would make it difficult with finches with large beaks to survive. So that's one thing that's been observed. Because of variations in these offspring, certain of them possess further special ability to adapt themselves after this process of variation and selection had gone on for a period of many generations. The organisms which survived differed markedly from those that first struggled to adapt. A new species would arise, and this would be over millions and millions of years. Just small variations would, over time, create new species. And in other words, nature, in the struggle for existence, selects the organisms most capable of adaptation to the environment. Supposedly, this lends to the improvement of each creature in relation to its environment and consequently to the advancement of the species, right? So the animals that exist today are best suited for the environment, and the ones that are not are dying off. Since our environment is changing with global climate change and a shifting kind of geological climate changes throughout the world, we are beginning to see, we were seeing the greatest rate of extinction in geological history. So we can see, we'll be able to see Darwin's theories in practice in real time in many ways. Social Darwinism used these biological laws to justify the workings of the free market. It applied the theory of evolution and the principle of natural selection to society and explained the economic fight between one man and another over nature's scarce resources. Spencer argued that human society and institutions, like organisms, pass through the process of natural selection, which resulted in his phrase, the survival of the fittest, right? This is Spencer's phrase, survival of the fittest, not Darwin's. Thus, social Darwinism was a justification for the wealth of the new rich in the Second Industrial Revolution, as they deserved what they had because they were the fittest within society and produced what society needed. The poor, on the other hand, were weak, and like the rest of nature's processes, had to be weeded out, as they were a drag on society. The only acceptable charity was voluntary charity, and even that was of dubious value, according to Spencer. Spencer warned that, quote, fostering the good for nothing at the expense of the good, well, it's an extreme cruelty, unquote. American businessmen in particular appreciated the application of Spencer's evolutionary ideas to social and economic practices. According to the theory, successful businessmen and corporations were the engine of progress. If a small business, if a small business were crowded out by trusts and monopolies, that too was part of the process. John D. Rockefeller told a Baptist Sunday school class once, employing social Darwinistic ideas to justify monopolies, the growth of a large business is merely survival of the fittest. The American beauty rose can be produced in the splendor and fragrance which bring cheer to its beholder only by sacrificing the early buds which grow around it. This is not an evil tendency in business. It is merely the working out of a law of nature and the law of God, unquote. Since Spencer felt success in business demonstrated superior ability to adapt to circumstances, failure implied inferior ability. Hence, he was convinced that intrusion of the state into economic and social spheres only interrupted the process by which nature impersonally rewarded the strong and eliminated the unfit. Spencer opposed relief for the poor, housing regulations, public education, and even laws to protect consumers from medical quacks. Spencer felt if society changed at all, it must move slowly. Attempts by reformers to hurry it along were futile, as the process of nature was predetermined. Man could not control nature, but could only enjoy what nature allowed him. Social evolution implied progress, ending, quote, only in establishment of the greatest perfection of the most complete happiness, unquote. So basically, if we allow nature's process to unveil itself without interfering with it, society will perfect itself, right? And the most fit amongst us on the planet Earth will be left, and we will have a perfected society. Incidentally, this becomes the early justification for, this becomes basically the same justification for the Nazis in the mid-20th century. Discuss the, we're going to go right into concept 3 in this clip. Discuss the American Darwinist William Graham Sumner and compare him to Herbert Spencer. William Graham Sumner was an American philosopher. He was a social Darwinist in the late 19th century. So Sumner, like Darwin and Spencer, adopted the theory of competition as a law of nature. But unlike Spencer, Sumner did not feel that the pressure for food, for struggle for life, made for inevitable progress. Right. So that was central to Spencer's philosophy, was that if we get out of the way, meaning government, progress will happen. Right. It'll be a better society. Sumner accepted that there were going to be problems in society, but nonetheless, we should maintain society for the benefit of the rich over the poor. So according to Sumner, there would always be inequities in society, and there would always be a group of people at the bottom of the social pyramid, and the reason for this is that people aren't equal. Right? This is Sumner's argument. Sumner felt private property was an important feature of society in the struggle for existence, and that it produced inequalities between people. Property allowed some people to enjoy more rights and privileges in society than other people. Nature grants her rewards to the fittest if there is liberty, Sumner believed. So, quote from him, "Liberty means the security given to each man that if he employs his energies to sustain the struggle on behalf of himself and those he cares for, he will get from nature in just proportion to his works," unquote. In other words, liberty means the existence of laissez-faire, right? Hands off. For Sumner, this was the system of nature. If one did not like it, there was only one way to change it. Take the rewards from those who had done well and give it to those that had not. The inequalities would be relieved, they would be fixed, but survival of the unfit would be furthered and liberty would be destroyed, according to Sumner. Now, Sumner believed that democracy was not based on reason. It was based on a natural process of the American environment. Democracy was created by the opportunity founded in the landed frontier, where there was no structures, no pre-existing government, no pre-existing expectations. As the landed frontier diminished, so would democracy, Sumner argued, hence showing itself to be merely a temporary condition. And if you think about how the 20th century, the early 20th century began, or towards the mid-20th century with the rise of fascism in Europe, Imperial Japan, people were beginning really to question the merits of democracy and its practicality within modern society. So Sumner was definitely touching on a chord within a certain element within society for his time. That would later be put into practice that would cause great havoc within world society, being World War II. As Sumner's arguments became accepted in society, the anti-government appeal did more than merely paralyze political initiative. It also shifted government balance away from the executive and legislative branch to the judicial, to the courts. The task of constitutional government, declared Sumner, is to devise institutions which shall come into play at critical periods to prevent the abusive control of the powers of the state by controlling classes in it, Sumner, unquote. Sumner meant the courts. From the 1870s on, the courts increasingly took this protective role of property and the right to acquire it. So during the 1870s and 80s, the judicial attack was directed mainly against social welfare and the regulatory laws created by the states. The major weapon by the Supreme Court was the 14th Amendment, which prohibited the states from depriving, quote, any person of life, liberty, or property without due process. This due process clause intended to protect the civil rights of black men, predominantly in the South, after the Civil War during the Reconstruction era, as we discussed in that lecture. Gradually, though, what begins to happen through the court process, and we'll talk. You'll in the next concept, concept 4, we'll go into greater detail in this. But basically, corporations become recognized as legal persons within U.S. law. In the 1880s and 90s, the Supreme Court erected similar barriers against the federal government through narrow interpretations of the constitutions. Basically, the courts ruled in 1895 that the power to regulate interstate commerce did not cover manufacturers, and the power to tax did not extend to personal incomes. Finally, since economic success was the mark of fitness, and since fitness can be equated with goodness, Sumner felt the rich were not only the highest products of the evolutionary process, but morally they were the best members of society. The opposite, of course, held true of the poor, as material wealth had become a sign of goodness and usually met acceptance within our society. Wealth had become the absolute value. The impact of the value system is best demonstrated by actually, it's a quote by Art Harper, but I think for purposes of time, I might put this in a different clip. Real quick, within our society, the significance of social Darwinism in the development of American industrialism is that it led to a practice that the end justified the means. Survival was profit, and a company had to adjust to the environment to do whatever was necessary in order to survive. The captains of industry, the robber barons, the so-called robber barons, were not cheating the public. They deserved the power and extra wealth that they had because they organized their resources for better output and the betterment of society. Because America represented the land of opportunity, there was no initial opposition to social Darwinism because all thought they could profit from it if they just applied themselves. After generations of workers had failed to progress with the system and its inequalities had become known, opposition soon developed towards the theory of social Darwinism in the form of labor and the progressive movements, which we'll take a look at in later lectures. A typical example of the practice of social Darwinism in the industrial frontier can be found in either John D. Rockefeller in the development of the oil industry or Andrew Carnegie in the rise of his steel industry. And we'll take a closer look at Andrew Carnegie in Concept 5. All right, thanks for staying tuned for Concept 2 and 3. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns, either in email or in class. Talk to you guys later. Bye.